This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
So, welcome to the start of your studies on your financial reporting paper for the ACCA. And I think the best place to go through and start is to not just jump straight into the accounting standards or to go through there and jump into your group accounts. I think personally, the best place to start off with is looking at the framework, the IASB conceptual framework. Why? Well, if we begin to look at all the rules within our accounting standards, if we begin to look at the rules that govern the preparation of our group financial statements, then there is one underpinning item that brings them all together. And that there is the IASB conceptual framework. Whatever rules we develop, whether it's there about a particular accounting standard, maybe to do with property, plant and equipment, or some of the newer ones such as revenue, leases, financial instruments, they are all underpinned by the fundamental rules that we see within the IASB conceptual framework. I always think that the best way to think about it is that this conceptual framework is like the Rosetta Stone. Has anybody heard of the Rosetta Stone? Has anybody been to see the Rosetta Stone in the British Museum in London? People are looking at me. I've never been to London, Chris. But if you have, pop along to the British Museum. You'll see the Rosetta Stone. It is the most popular item that people go there and view. Why? Because there are inscriptions within that stone. And what those inscriptions allowed historians to go through and do was to go through there and use the Rosetta Stone to help them understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Okay, so what did all those ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic symbols actually translate into in terms of your language? Okay, and effectively that's what we've got here. Okay, the Rosetta Stone underpinned everything that we then now have with regards effectively to language, because hieroglyphics and writing were effectively the first languages and inscriptions used, weren't they, in the world as we know it. And therefore, you've now got this framework that underpins and links into all the accounting rules that we have within your IFRSs and your IASs. Okay, and I think that's what it goes through there, doesn't it? And says within that first paragraph, provides the underlying rules, conventions and definitions that underpin the preparation of all financial statements prepared under your IFRSs. Okay, so what that then ensures is effectively that we have consistency from one standard to the other. We are going to have the same basis of preparation. Okay, if we have them developed under that conceptual framework, they are going to be prepared upon the same foundations, aren't they? Likewise, also the actual framework could be used if there was a very complex transaction and if there was no standard that was currently in existence, which is going to be very, very rare, but on the odd occasion could appear within the real world, not going to be the case in the exam world. Then you can use the underlying principles within the framework to go through there and decide, well, is it a liability or is it equity? And if it meets the definition of a liability or equity, can I recognize it within the financial statements? And then at what amount do I measure it at? Okay. It also goes through there and helps us improve the existing standards. So you'll have noticed that particularly as we go through some of the later chapters, we begin to look at the new accounting standards, which are there based upon revenue, leases, financial instruments. They are all underpinned by the same rules that we have. So when we start to look at revenue, we begin to look at assets and start to begin to look at control. Similarly, when we begin to look at leases, we begin to look at assets and whether or not we recognize them. So therefore, we need to look at the definition of the asset. Again, the key word that we see is control. And therefore, we're underpinning those standards based upon the same rules. Likewise, as well, the framework begins to look at measurement bases. So we go through there and see a lot of fair value. So here we begin to look at fair value as a measurement basis and then apply that to our accounting standards. Okay. It also ensures that the information that we have is useful and, if you like, relevant, because therefore the users of the accounts know that if they have some specific rules that underpin the transactions that are presented within the financial statements, then if the purpose of the financial statements is to give useful information to the users, to help them understand maybe the returns that they're going to get on their investment, to be able to go through there and look at the amount of liquidity or solvency within this business to see whether or not we're going to get the cash coming in, whether or not we can make the payments to our suppliers, then that's going to go through there and help those users of the account, isn't it? Okay. But by following these underpinning rules, we're going to ensure there that different users who may have different needs can use the same set of financial statements. And then finally there, it should help prevent creative accounting. If we're following a fundamental set of concepts, then we should not be circumventing those principles, and therefore that will rule out any potential creative accounting. However, there's still that risk that creative accounting exists, and that's whereby you then start to think about ethics. But ethics doesn't really appear within this financial reporting paper. Your ethics is much more of a topic when you get to your strategic business reporting paper, your SBR. So this is what effectively the framework does. I think that would make a great multiple choice question, wouldn't it? Which of the following are, or which of the following are not the purpose of the ISB conceptual framework? Okay. Because you've seen a lot of this before. You've seen it within your financial accounting paper, haven't we? Which you may have passed a while ago. So it's reasonably familiar, but not 100% familiar. So you need to brush up on that knowledge. But the key bit that we're going to see is that the knowledge is more tested via its application. So not asking you to recall the definition of an asset, recall the definition of a liability, but apply a particular transaction to see whether or not that does meet the definition of an asset or does meet the definition of a liability. So we've got the areas that we need to go through and look at here. The objective of financial reporting. So what are we trying to do by preparing these financial statements? What's the main aims? We then look at the qualitative characteristics. So how do we go through and make the information useful to the users that we identify within the first part, looking at the objectives. We then begin to look at the elements. So assets, liabilities, equity, income, expense, and how we then have to then learn the definitions, but then apply them. The recognition criteria. So yes, we know the definition of an asset, but can we recognise it? Okay, we might have an asset, but if there are no probable inflow of economic benefits and we can't measure it reliably, then we can't recognise it. And that's where that then ties in to areas that we see within our intangible assets. We've then got the measurement criteria. So how do we go through that and measure the assets? How do we measure the liabilities? You'll see a common term today which is referred to as fair value. So effectively we go through there and look at the fair value of the asset, the fair value of the liability, knowing that if we get the fair values of the asset correct, if we get the fair value of the liability correct, then the movement, the difference between them can simply go to profit or loss and other comprehensive income. So you'll see there's a very much a large focus within your IFRSs upon the statement of financial position, upon getting the measurement right within the statement of financial position, and then everything else effectively goes through there and takes care of itself. And then we go through there and briefly touch upon the world of capital maintenance. So normally our business will make profits. If our business has made profits, then that is an improvement in the performance, isn't it? Now, what happens there if there is inflation? What happens if we begin to look at purchasing power, interest rates? You know, the rates of inflation, the rates of interest could have an impact on your profitability and therefore might erode the purchasing power of your profits, and therefore the business may not have performed as well as what you initially would have thought. Okay. So where are you likely to go through and see this? It could just be a question, a multiple choice question in section A. there could be a discussion aspect maybe in section C for maybe 3 or 4 marks in terms of the application. So it is worthwhile spending a little bit of time understanding the framework. And I think once you understand the framework, it really does then go through and allow you to understand the IFRSs and the rules themselves. Not just at this level, financial reporting, but also as you move on to your strategic business reporting paper, whereby the same rules apply, the same underpinning concepts apply, but the transactions get that little bit more challenging. And if you've got a good idea of how the framework works, what the definitions are and their application now, then that's going to aid you not just in financial reporting, but also within strategic business reporting. So what we'll go through and do is we'll finish it up here in terms of our little introduction. We'll then begin to go through there and have a look at all the definitions and their application in the following videos.